So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a look at how you take the assessment data that you took from the assessment and how you use it to use the scoring and then how you use that to go and use the primary numeracy framework. So let's take a look. This is just a snippet part from the assessment. Obviously, it's going to look very familiar. This is just the part from the profile page at the very beginning that you use to record your data to as like a cheat sheet. And then obviously this is from the counting part from the primary numeracy framework. So look, we're going to go through a scenario and I'm going to show you what it looks like and we'll look at what this has for the implications for instruction as well. So say you go through and you're giving this assessment and you have a student who is a level B of mastery, which means they can count up to 22. Okay, so you gave them this, they were able to count to 22, but for whatever reason they weren't able to get through level C. So these would have maybe a check or an X or an accident, but we've determined that level B is their level. So what you would do is once you have that level B on the very front page, which is where this can be located right here, you would go ahead and you would put a check mark in that box. That means that they are a level B, okay? And then that means that they can count to 22. Remember, level B means it's a mastery of a particular skill, and the skill is the ability to count from 9 up until 22. So then when you go to the framework and you go to map it, you would go ahead and they would put for level B. So what does this have for implications for their instruction? Now think about it. If a student is a level B and it means that they can count up to 22, for instructional purposes, it means we're not going to be working on anything that has to do with level B because they already have mastery of that. So what it means is if they are a level B, we are going to be bridging the next group of numbers is really going to be working from 23 up to 113. So our range is growing on what we're going to work on. Okay. So again, if you take a look at the framework down here or right here, what we're actually doing is, now you wouldn't draw this on there, but it's just showing, okay, if they're testing at this level right here, level B, we know that if they have mastery of it, we've documented that our instruction is going to begin at level C. But what if a student cannot count to 10? What will that look like? Because most students who do take this assessment, this is really designed for, mid to end of the year, first graders, second graders, third graders. Most kids will orally be able to count to 10. However, sometimes you just may have a situation. So if you have a student who cannot count to 10, all you would do is, if you take a look, go ahead and use that X, right? And that X just means that they were unable to do that skill. Now, when you go over to the front page, to the profile page, there's two ways that you can do this. You can go ahead and you can just put an X in that box. And remember, X would mean that they can't do it. If you think you may get confused and say, well, I put an X in that box, and does that mean that they can do it or can't do it? You also can just put an X right outside the box so they know, like, okay, they definitely were not a level A. So again, if you'll get confused between using X's and checks, you can go ahead and do that. So when you go through and you go to the framework to map it, here's what it's going to look like. You would go ahead and you would put that X right there and think, it's not really a level X, but what we're saying is that if X is their starting point, we know that, well, they need to receive instruction at level A, and so that's what would happen. They would receive their instruction at level A. And that is just the basics. Now, the next slide that we're going to do, we'll look more at the instructional materials and using the level activities guide with a lot of the materials so we can see what that looks like as well. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at what the leveled activities guide, and we're going to explain what this is designed to do because some people have some confusion with this. So I just want to go over this again, what this is designed to do. It says the activities guide has already adjusted the level for you. You do not need to go to the next level. Just look at the tested level and look down. So for example, take a look at this, okay? So say you have a student who tested at a level A, okay? So you went through and you filled out your framework and you plotted that right there. What this is designed to do is say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and look at level A. And remember, level A means they could successfully count up to 10. So if you take a look here, it'll say, count counters on a 10 or 20 frame or 20 rack, or a 10 rack or 20 rack, or calculator count up to 10 or 20. So what you need to understand is level A is designed for two things. One, for kids who level X means that you would be working on level A, but you would be choosing up to 10, because remember, if they're that level X, it means they couldn't count to 10. If you have a student who is a level A, you would just go ahead and look at level A and you know that you're going to be working towards 20, okay? So even though this level X and level A are going to be looking at the same place, you need to know level A. Yes, if your kids can count to 10, you're going to go ahead and choose the 20. You're going to work on the range of up to 20 on all these things. And for a student who can't count to 10, you would go ahead and look at it that way. Okay. So again, if you take a look at level B now, let's take a look at level B. Level B says they can sort of count up to 20 and back from 23. So this is level B, but if you take a look, level C, it's saying calculator count greater than 20. So it's already accounting for, we're working on numbers greater than 20, and we're going to go up to essentially, 113. So take a look. These numbers, even though this is level B, it means they can go up to 20. These are all greater. So you're looking, and then again with level C, it means they can count up to 113 and back from 73. Take a look. Calculator count past 113. So it's just the ranges of numbers is changing. So this is meant to be like a very quick cheat sheet. I have a student who's a level B, I look, and this is giving me the activities. All right. So again, if a student is a level A, you're going to look at level A and just choose the 20 range instead of the 10 range, all right? If a student is, is unable to count to 10 and they're sort of that level X or that starting point, you're going to go to level A and you're just going to focus in on the 10, the range of 10 instead of the range of 20. All right, and everything else will be done that way. So this is what it's designed to do is you can look at it and then you just go straight down with your eyes. You don't have to do any adjusting. If you look at level B and then you jump and you say, oh, I'm going to work on level C, you're going to realize this range are numbers that they haven't even worked on yet. So that's why you'll stay. One thing I want to make clear too is remember if they're that level X right there, that just means they're working on level A and you're choosing the 10 range instead of the 20. Now, if you take a look here, these are the e-lessons that go along with it. Now, with the e-lessons, you need to understand this. When using the e-lessons and workbook, you do need to adjust to the next level. And it sounds more complex than it is. So if you have a student who's a level A, right? If you work on level A, you're going to realize this is just the range up to 10. So if they're a level A mastery, you know that you need to go to level B because that's the next range of numbers, all right? And even if you do make a mistake and work at the wrong level, it's going to click like, hey, they can already count to 10, so why are we working on the numbers between 0 and 10? And that's what it's designed to do. So now what we're going to do is we're going to look at the addition subtraction part of the assessment. Look at the addition subtraction part on the student profile and then look at the framework, okay? Because addition subtraction, it's a little bit different than the first part. And I'll show you why it's different and why we treat it differently and how what you may do for counting, you may not do for addition subtraction, okay? So again, I don't want to get into the actual administration of the assessment. If you have questions on that, just go back to the webinar and watch over those pages, okay? But this is the part that's been clipped from the assessment where it has the 4 addition problems, 4 subtraction problems, and it has the strategies. Then we have right here, which is on the student profile, okay? And so a student can either be a level A or a level B or level C or level D. And one thing is, what is the difference between level X and level A? And again, with level X, what we mean is like, okay, if a student's a level X or level A, how do I score that and what does that mean? So essentially what a level A means is that a student is dropping back to 1 or represents all objects. So a student you would almost give them a check mark in the box for level A if they're dropping back to 1 or representing all objects and they're getting the answer correct, okay? Because remember, with the addition subtraction, it's not as much about getting the correct answer as it is measuring the level of sophistication of the strategies that they're using, okay? So if a student is using low level strategies but getting it right, you would go ahead and just give them the check marks in level A. Now say students are using these low level strategies, they're dropping back to 1, they're re-representing and they're getting the wrong answer, that's when you would go ahead and say and give them an X, okay? And again, as with counting, if you're not comfortable, putting an X in the box because you may think that that's what they're doing, you can go ahead and put the X outside of the box as well, okay? So then when you're working on the framework down here, what you'd be doing is, if a student's using low-level strategies and they're getting it wrong, you would go ahead and put it in the X or the A. Now here's the good thing about it. Whether a student is this level, this level X, which is just a starting point, it's not really even considered an X, it's just called X because we use the X to mark it wrong. But whether they're an X or an A, instructionally you're going to be doing the exact same things. So as for instruction, it doesn't matter because you're doing the exact same things that for an X or for a level A. And what's important to remember too is when it comes to the instructional part, It says, addition subtraction is not a measure of a skill set with a range, it's assessing a thinking level or a strategy. Now for counting, like we were saying, like almost answering yes or no. Can the student count to 10? Yes. Can the student count to 20? Yes or no. And so we're able to say that. What the addition and subtraction ones are is it's measuring a thinking level or a skill. So, and remember, level A and level B show either a novice or a partial understanding of a larger skill. So if a student's a level A, it's not like you're gonna say, okay, they're level A, now we'll go level B, because level A isn't really an achievement, it's just showing a level of thinking with incomplete thoughts. So what you'll do is, and we'll get into this on the next slide, is if they score a level A, you work instructionally with them at level A because A is an incomplete level. Same thing with level B. It says level A and B either show novice or partial understanding of larger skill. And then it says, therefore, when it comes to using the materials, you do not go to the next level because level A and level B both show an incomplete skill set and no actual skill was achieved. Okay, so what that means is if we take a look here, if a student scores a level B or a level C, we'll take a look at what this means, because remember, level A means they're not using the strategies we want. They're using a low level of thinking, okay? So it's not like that was earned. It's like this is just their low level of thinking that they're using. Here's where we need to instruct. Now level B, now remember, level B is a weird level because though a student can be a level B, they're actually getting their answers wrong because it's showing they have the skill of counting on, but they're not doing it accurately. So again, level B is an incomplete skill because they partially understand it, but they're not fully using it. So again, if it's level B, it's not like it's an earned actual score, so you would again instruct at level B. Now, when you look at level C is different because the whole goal of this, we want to make sure, okay, are they counting on, right? And once they start counting on, then we can start to make sure they're using those more facile or advanced strategies. And so again, because the skill we want them to do is well counting on and they're accurately doing it, then we can say, all right, they're doing the skill we want them to do. Now, because they've achieved this skill of counting on, we know they're now ready for the next level, which would be level D, which is the more advanced, you could say, addition subtraction strategies. Okay. So again, in summary, we'll go over this on the next one. Level A and B, if they test at level A or B, you're still going to use level A and level B instructional materials with them. Okay. Now, if they score level C, that means they can count on, they can do everything. We'll immediately start working at level D, and we'll go over this on the next slide as well. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to take a look at the leveled activities guide for addition subtraction and just kind of build on top of what we just went over. So remember, when you have a student who is either a level, this sort of starting level, level X, or level A, remember you're going to be working in level A because level A is an incomplete skill. Okay, it means they're either dropping back to 1 or representing all the objects, or they're not even able to do that. So because they're using that low level of thinking, we're going to instruct them at level A. Okay. Now again, if a student is level B, remember level B also is an incomplete skill because what they're doing is they're counting on, they're counting back, but they're inaccurate with it. So again, level A is just a measure of a very low level strategy. Are they using it and are they getting it right? Yes or no. Level B is yes, they can do part of the strategy they can count on, but they're not accurate with it. Okay. If you take a look here now at level C, this is where things start to change. Because remember, level C has to do with can they count on and be accurate with it. So because level C, the goal is that you want them to be counting on and counting back and they're accurate, that shows that they have completed the skill and they are doing it. And so once they are level C, then you would go ahead and work on level D with them. So remember, addition and subtraction, addition and subtraction is not a measure of a skill set with a range. It's assessing a thinking level or a strategy. Level A and B show either novice or partial understanding of a larger skill. Now remember though, when you go through and do the materials, if someone tests at a level A, you would go ahead and use the materials at level A or level B or so on, and level C and level D. Okay, because that's what your goal is. And let's take a look at what these activities are. So for level A, it says drops back to 1 or represents all. So take a look. You're going to be using counters and putting a screen over it and saying we have 5 counters covered. How many altogether? So 5, 6, 7. You're encouraging them to count on. Or use number cards with a domino. We have 7, 8, 9, 10. Teaching them that they can count on or doing that bucket counting. Remember, level B, they're already counting on, so we're going to be doing things that focus in on the accuracy of it. So again, if we have 4 counters and 2, have them screen. Are they able to hold it and go 4, 5, 6? Okay. And again, with level B, a lot of kids, this what it is, if it's 8 plus 2, they'll go 8, 9. They're counting the starting point as a count instead of counting on from 8. They're going 8, 9, so they're going to be 1 short. That's a really common thing. So again, with level B, you're just solidifying that, yes, they can count on what you want to make sure they're accurate. Then when you go to level C, that means they're counting on accurately, and there's just very little materials even in the books for level C, because once they're counting on, you want to immediately shift so they don't become dependent or thinking counting on, counting back is a permanent strategy, where they'll be working on the make 10 strategy, the double strategy, and so on. And then finally, level D is facile flexible, and that would just mean you're going to start working on two-digit addition subtraction strategies with them. So now what we're going to do is we're going to look at the part whole or the missing number part of the assessment. And again, we're not going to spend much time on the scoring or the administering of this part. If you want more of that, you can go ahead and look at the webinar. But this is where you're measuring the student's ability to do part whole relationship of the number 5, 10, 20, and so on. So the assessment starts off with going through up to 5. And remember, what you're looking for is a student to have sort of facile or flexible thinking. And what that means is when you say 2 plus something equals 5, or they see that, when they see that, they'll just say 3. And this one, they would say right here, they would say 5 and 4 and 1 and so on. So there's no math and no calculation going on. So what's interesting is if a student is able to do this and they're facile flexible, they would be considered a level B. So what is the difference between level X and level A? And that's a question that a lot of people have. So level A says non-facile methods are inaccurate. And then it says examples such as, fingers, counts up, objects, taps, and so on. So say a student, for this one, you say, 2 plus something is 5, and you see them, and they have to go ahead and 2, and then they pull out their fingers, go 3, 4, 5. Yes, they got that correct. So what you would do is you would go ahead and say, yes, the student got this one correct, but they used a low-level strategy. So that's when you would give them a level A. Now remember, level A is not really an achievement of anything, because it's just saying, yes, they're using a very low-level strategy, and the measure of this is to measure their thinking or their strategy. Now say a student uses a low-level strategy, such as fingers or counts, or they're just not able to get the correct answer, then you could go ahead and say, okay, and for level A, what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put an X in the box. And that means that they couldn't even get the right answer using a low-level method, which means that they were inaccurate. Now remember, as with everything else, if you don't want to put that X in that box, because you may think it may represent that they got it right, you can put the X outside the box as well. But it really doesn't matter, because if you take a look down here, whether they are a level X, that starting point, or level A, you're going to go to level B for instruction anyway. So it doesn't matter what level they actually are right here. All it matters is that they're going to end up in the same spot. So whether a student is using low-level strategies and having success with it, but they're just so low, or they're not able to get the right answer, you're still instructionally going to start off at the same point. And remember, level B, all level B is that they can solve to 5. So you'd be working on 5. Now remember, the rest of this assessment too is if they're able to get through 5, they're 100% accurate and they're facile flexible, then you would go ahead and go to the next part with 10. And then after that, you would go to 20 and so on. So remember too is, if a student, and we're going to get into the instructional part on the next slide, but if a student scores, they're 100% accurate and they're facile for level B, you'd go to instructional C. And if they're able to do 10, you'd go to level D and so on. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at using the framework, which is right here, and taking a look at a student test at a level X or a level A or B or C, how to match it up with the leveled activities guide. Now remember, the activities guide is always set up, right? The activities guide it's different from the e-lessons and the workbooks, but this is set up so you can go ahead and you can look at it, and you just look at the level they tested at and you go down. So for example, if you take a look, if a student's test at level X or level A, right? Level X or level A, here's what it says. It says, level A is non-facile strategies. Now remember, if you take a look, every single one of these activities under this level A, for which is what they tested at, which is, remember, level A is a default. If they show up and do nothing, they'll still be considered to be a level A, which is just a starting point. But if you take a look, every single one of these activities has to do with what? Every single one has to do with making 5. So even though they scored at level A, all of these activities right here are each and every single one of these deals with making 5, which is actually level B stuff. Okay? So that's saying, so if you look at level X or level A, you can go up here. Yes, this says level A, that's just what they tested, but these are level B things to do. Now again, think about what level B is. Level B means that they can successfully make 5. So if we take a look, level B is here and solves to 5, but take a look. Since they have mastery of level B, and we're just looking, every single one of these activities has to do with what? It has to do with making 10 or numbers from that range of 5 to 10. Okay, so each and every one of these. So again, this is level B that you look at, but each one of these is working on 10, and that means that it is level C. Okay, so again, now if a student is able to solve 5, and then they are able to solve 10, so if you take a look, if they can solve 10, it means they're level C. And again, if they can solve level C, that means 10. Every single one of these activities under level C isn't a level D thing, because level D has to do with solving up to 20. Okay, so remember, you wouldn't go ahead and say, okay, if they're level C, I'm going to move to level D, because this is already transitioned for you, where you just look at their level tested, then these are the activities that you do. If a student tests at a level D, right? Level D means that they can successfully solve up to 20, and take a look, every single one of these is the next one, which is working on 100. So that's what it's designed to do, is when you're using the framework and trying to match it up with the activities, remember, you do not need to skip a level, because the level has already been shifted for you. So it's already there. So even though this says level B, these are level C things. Just because this says level C, that just lets you know, yep, that's what they can solve to 10, but this is 20. And even if you do make a mistake, real quick, you're going to notice it, because you're going to be like, say they're level B, and they can solve the 5, right? And you look, and everything you're working on is 20. That's not going to make sense, because you know that 10 comes after it. So you'll catch it really quickly too. Now remember though, now when you are working on your in the ebooks or in the workbook or in this, now again, this is exactly what it is. So if you have a student who say they are a level, say they mastery level B, right? And level B means working to 10. So each one of these is level C. You would have to go to the level C book. And there's a document in multiple places that shows you where the framework level, what materials you actually use. Okay? And again, if a student is mastery of level C, right? Level C means they can successfully solve missing addends up to 10. They're working on 20. And this is all level D stuff. You would go ahead and you would use this level D, and then out of this workbook right here, you would use level D as well. So now we're going to look at the place value part. And the very first part of the place value assessment has to do with skip counting. And skip counting is the ability to count by hundreds, tens, and ones while counting and transitioning to another place value and then another place value after that. So level A, if you take a look, level A is an achieved level. So we know that, like with addition, subtraction, and with part-whole relationship, level A was more or less looking at the lowest level of thinking or strategy. Level A is actually an achieved task for place value. So if you take a look right here for this particular one, if they're able to do level A, that's actually a measurable skill that we wanted them to do. We want to say a task. Could they count by tens and ones with a representation, yes or no? So if they could do that, yes, that would mean that they were able to do it. So we're going to take a look at what is the difference between level X and level A. So if a student is able to do this level A, that means that they're able to do it. Now say a student is not able to count by ones and tens with a representation. You would go ahead and give them an X right there. Or again, if you don't want to put it inside the box, you want to put it outside the box so you don't mistake that you're giving them credit for getting it right, you can go ahead and do that as well. And so that's important to remember, that level A is actually an achievement of a particular skill. Okay, so don't get it confused, because sometimes level A is a default for certain levels, sometimes it's an achieved skill. So for this particular one, it is definitely an achieved skill. So if you take a look here, if they get it wrong, you would go ahead and you could go ahead and just fill in this X right there. And if they are able to do it, you can go ahead and you can give them credit for that, because that means that they were able to count by hundreds, tens, and ones, and you would go ahead and draw that dot in right there. Now remember, So now looking at the instructional, now remember, even though this is all of the different place value, all the different place value things you can do for the level activities guide, we're still focusing just on the split counting part right here. So remember, with split counting, the way it works too is level A was an achieved level, okay? So if a student ends up being, this level X, you're gonna go ahead and you're gonna work on instructional stuff, level A. Now remember, level A is what? It means can they count things with the representation. So the reason why all these are clumped together is because it follows the CRA, which is the concrete representational abstract. And since all this place value part right here has to do with is counting, counting visual things, and then can they abstractly hold the count without seeing these visuals? So that's why the instruction, and when you go through the materials here, you'll see the way it's set up. And so it may seem a little confusing right now, but when you actually get into materials, you'll be like, oh, it makes sense because we're going to show them, we're going to give them, some manipulatives to use, then we're going to take them away and have them do it orally. So that's how it's set up to do. So remember, if they're level X, you're going to go ahead and you're looking at instruction for level A. If they're level A, you're going to go ahead and be working on level B. And if they're level B, you'll work on level C, and level C, you'll work on D. And the way the place value book is set up, it's I don't know if you can see this exactly, but it says, for split counting level A, level B, level C, level D. So you would just click on the next level from where they tested again. So if they're X, you're working on level A. If they're A, you're working on level B. And again, there's another document too that shows you when you look at the framework level, it'll tell you exactly which one of these materials to go ahead and that you can use. So this next part of place value, which has to do with adding from a base 10 and using place value concepts, or adding from a base 10. Now this is a little bit different than the last part because remember with split counting, level A was like an achieved task. Could they count ones and tens with a representation, yes or no? Now if you take a look at this one, the way the assessment's set up, you have level B, level C, level D, level B, level C, level D. Level A can't even be actually like tested. Like if they just show up and say nothing, they would sort of automatically default to a level A. So let's take a look at the framework here though. We have this framework which has this X and A. So the question is, what is the difference between level X and level A? So for this part right here, if we take a look at adding base 10, if a student says, okay, if you say, what is 10 more than 62, and they go, 63, 64, 65, 66, and they count by ones and they get it right, you could go ahead and say, okay, they got the answer right, but they used, a really low level strategy. Because remember, we're not seeing can they count on at this point. We're not seeing can they, can they count on 10? We're seeing can they apply a place value concept with addition? That's really what we're looking for them to do. So if they get it right, you can go ahead and you can say they would be a level A, and then you'd go ahead and fill in this dot right here. Say they count by ones and they get it wrong, or they're just not able to get the answer correct, then you can go ahead and put an X in the box, which means that obviously they didn't get that. Or you can put an X outside the box if you're not comfortable with that. Now, again, the beauty of this, or the great thing is, whether they are level X or level A, instructionally, they will, both of these levels, since they're at the same starting point, will work on level B, right? And if a student tests at a level B, that means that they can do 10 more, 10 less from 10, then level C mean they're working on 20, right? And then if they're able to do level C, they do level D, which is doing 100 more. Okay, so that's how this works. So if they're level X or level A, you'll automatically go to B. And again, there's the document that shows you the instructional, the levels and materials map, and it'll show you exactly where their framework plotting is, what to do and what to work on it with. So remember, for this part of the particular assessment right here, level A is a default. It's not necessarily an achieved level. If they get it right by counting by ones, or they're not able to do it instructionally, they're still going to end up in the same place. And the last part of this just has to do with the instructional parts, or where you're going to look. So remember, when you're looking at this framework right here, and again, everything seems to be really cluttered, and why is level A, B, C, and D all together? Because all of these, there's so much development that needs to go in place. And if you take a look with, especially with adding base 10, a lot of this has to do with things that you did when you were teaching about counting by tens with counting. So this is almost a replication of the strategies that you did. So if students can count by tens, this should be a really easy thing for them to do. If not, you may want to consider just going back and working on that counting by tens, because these are the exact same things you'll do to teach your kids to count by tens. So when you go through the instructional materials, there's just one part where it says place value, adding base 10 or adding from base 10. You click on that and it goes through a series of representations where it will have, a concrete and then an abstract, and that's how you're teaching them to do that, because really this part is a measure of sort of their understanding of place value and mental math. Okay, and again, in the books, you just go ahead and you would look at the levels that